Turtwig is the heaviest of the basic forms of all of the starter Pokemon. It also has the lowest base speed stat out of all starter Pokemon. Grottle is the heaviest of the second stage starter Pokemon at 213.8 pounds or 97 kilograms, being heavier than many other fully evolved starter Pokemon. Torterra's speed stat of 56 is the lowest base stat of any fully evolved starter Pokemon, and Torterra shares its category with Groudon. They are both known as the continent Pokemon. In Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, if the player chooses Chimchar, the wild Starly can defeat it when Chimchar's at 4 HP, bypassing the red HP bar state which would otherwise cause the Starly to flee. This causes the game to freeze, and it has a combined 1.56% probability. Monferno and its evolutionary relatives were designed by Takeo Ono, who also designed the Unovan monkeys and God. In English, the category Flame Pokemon is shared by Charmeleon, Charizard, Flareon, Cantonian Moltres, and Infernape. In Japanese, Flareon has the category Hono Pokemon, which means Flame Pokemon, while the other 4 Pokemon share the category Kaien Pokemon, which also means Flame Pokemon. Piplup is the most selected Sinnoh starter Pokemon in the anime, being the starter Pokemon of Dawn, Kenny, and Tyler. Primplup shares its category with its pre-evolved form and Eiscue. They are all known as the Penguin Pokemon. No other Pokemon has the same type combination as Empoleon. Due to this unique type combination, Empoleon is also the only fully evolved starter Pokemon which neither resists nor takes double damage from the moves of the other starter Pokemon types, Fire and Grass. Overworld sprites of Starly are shown in the intro of Diamond, Pearl and Platinum, and before the player and their rival encounter them in battle. They're the only non-legendary Pokemon to have overworld sprites in Diamond and Pearl that are not allowed in Amity Square. Staravia and Staraptor were given their English names by Nob Ogasawara. In Generation 6, Staraptor received a stat boost of 10 points, which increased its special defense from 50 to 60 and its base stat total from 475 to 485. On July 1st, 2021, the Pokemon Company created Bidoof Day, with several events related to this Pokemon in various media such as Pokemon Go, cards, and on Pokemon TV. To commemorate, they released a music video parodying Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley entitled Bidoof Day Announcement. Months later, the official Pokemon YouTube account released Bidoof's Big Stand, a short film focused on the story of a Bidoof. And no other Pokemon has the same type combination as Bibarel. Kricketot is the only Pokemon with a base stat total of 194, and Kricketot evolves at the lowest level of Pokemon that are part of a 2-stage evolutionary line, being at 10. Since Generation 7, Kricketune has had the lowest base stat total of any fully evolved Pokemon, with stats that are calculated through the traditional formula. Shedinja has a much lower base stat total, but this is due to its base HP of 1, which is not used in the calculation of its HP. Shinx bears a resemblance to a hoax Pokemon that was created on April Fool's Day 2005. The official Japanese Pokemon website, pokemon.co.jp, has a picture of Luxio on its HTTP 404 error page. This alludes to Luxio's national Pokedex number 0404. Luxray is the only Pokemon with a base stat total of 523. As of the Paradox Rift expansion of the trading card game, Budew has not received a new card in English for longer than any other Pokemon. Its most recent card in English was released in 2008 as part of Stormfront. Roserade is one of the 2 third-stage Pokemon which can be obtained at level 1 without the use of Pokemon Go, the other being Porygon Z. Cranidos is tied with Rockruff for the lowest base defense stat of all Rock-type Pokemon, and Cranidos and Shieldon evolve at level 30, the earliest of any fossil Pokemon. Rampardos has the highest base attack stat of all Rock-type Pokemon, and Rampardos and its pre-evolved form are the only fossil Pokemon of a single type. And Shieldon's only fact is about him and Cranidos evolving at level 30, and the wall of the castle in Courtyard Colosseum resembles a Bastiodon's head. Although Burmy has been confirmed to have feet, it does not have a footprint. And except for recurring end segments such as Professor Oak's Big Pokemon Encyclopedia, Burmy has never been seen in the anime wearing either the Sandy or Trash Cloak. In Pokemon Black and White, School Kid Anne on Route 12 has a Sandy Cloak Wormadam that knows Leaf Storm, a move that Sandy Cloak Wormadam cannot learn by any means. It is instead learned by Plank Cloak Wormadam. This Wormadam should instead know Fissure. Burmy, Wormadam, Mothim, Geodude, Graveler, and Golem are the only Pokemon in all 5 Hisui Pokedex sublistings. Combee has the lowest base HP stat and the lowest base stat total of all Flying-type Pokemon, and Combee is the only Pokemon with a gender-dependent evolutionary line to have aesthetic gender differences. Prior to Generation 8, Vespiquen had 3 signature moves: Attack Order, Defend Order, and Heal Order. Heal Order is not available to Vespiquen from Generation 8 onwards, and Vespiquen can create Max Honey when Dynamaxed. Pachirisu is the only Pokemon to learn Hyper Fang to not be a normal type. It's also the only Pokemon allowed in Amity Square that is not part of an evolutionary family, and of course, Pachirisu has the lowest base stat total of any Pokemon that was part of a winning team of Pokemon World Championships. Buizel was one of 3 Pokemon revealed in March 2006 in promotions for Pokemon Ranger and the Temple of the Sea, along with Mantike and Chatot, and every Buizel that's been shown in the anime so far is male. In Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon, when at any amount of HP above 50%, Floatzel will exclaim, quote, "I'm proud of my flotation sac, but I wonder if I could swim without it." Whether this means it's removable or he dreams of what that would be like, I honestly couldn't tell you. Cherubi can be spawned in all existing tree-based mechanics that can spawn Pokemon, honey trees, headbutt trees, berry trees, as well as shaking trees in Pokemon Legends Arceus, in games where Cherubi is available. Cherrim and Castform are the only Pokemon whose alternate forms cannot be viewed in the Pokédex in Diamond, Pearl and Platinum. Only the Overcast form and its gender differences, though it has none, are available. But it is not labelled as such. And in version 1.0.1 of Legends Arceus, a glitch made Wild Cherrim in Sunshine form uncatchable. This was later fixed in version 1.0.2. Shellos' English Pokédex entry for Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver has the fewest words of any Pokédex entry in the core series game, with 9. The Pokédex entry is carried over to Pokemon Y and Pokemon Alpha Sapphire. The same is true for Kyurem in White. According to an interview in Nintendo Power with Game Freak, Gastrodon and Shellos were originally intended for Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, and Gastrodon was featured alongside several bovine Pokemon, namely Tauros, Miltank and Bouffalant, in multiple promotional artworks created to celebrate New Year's 2021, also known as the Year of the Ox. Despite it learning Dual Chop via Level Up starting in Generation 7, it can't learn it via Move Tutor in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. And Ambipom has a base speed stat of 115, which ties it with Azelf, Mega Absol, Raikou and Mega Rayquaza. And Ambipom's attack stat of 100 ties it with a bunch of Pokemon, but most notably, Complete Form Zygarde, Giratina, Mega Medicham, and Mew. In the Japanese version of Pearl's Pokédex entry, Drifloon specifically takes children to the world of the dead, instead of just trying to steal them away as in the English version. However, in the release of Super Smash Bros. Brawl in the United States, the description along with Drifloon's trophy still states that it is taking children to the underworld. Drifblim has the highest base HP stat of all flying-type Pokemon, and is tied with Giratina for the highest base HP stat of all Ghost-type Pokemon. Prior to Generation 9, Baneri was the only Pokemon with 0 base friendship that was not legendary, a mythical Pokemon, or an Ultra Beast. This is now a trait it shares with Lokix. Lopunny is the only Pokemon that can learn Return by leveling up. Its pre-evolved form learns Frustration at the same level, and is also the only one to learn it by leveling up. Mismagius's base HP, attack and defense stats are the same as Misdreavus's, but its special attack, special defense and speed stats are higher. And Mismagius can be seen as a parallel to Haunchcrow, both a Generation 4 Pokemon that evolve when exposed to a Dust Stone, and have pre-evolved forms that were introduced in Generation 2. Mismagius is exclusive to Pearl, White and Shining Pearl, while Haunchcrow is exclusive to Diamond, Black and Brilliant Diamond. Haunchcrow's attack of 125 is fairly impressive, putting Haunchcrow up there with the likes of Galarian Zapdos, Gyarados, Mega Steelix and Cranidos. And despite being part Dark-type, Pokepark Wii Pikachu's Adventure reveals that nothing scares Haunchcrow except ghosts. Glameow is the only Pokemon not introduced or given a new form in Generation 7 whose model was altered between Generations 6 and 7. Specifically, its ears were repositioned. Purugly is known for its absurd speed stat, making it faster than Mega Latios and Latias, but a few other Pokemon it's faster than would be the Forces of Nature, Garchomp, Rapidash and Mega Pinsir, who have dex entries mentioning just how fast they are, and Genesect, who is literally a rocket if you've never seen him move. Chingling, as of the Crown Tundra, is the only baby Pokemon that is absent from Pokemon Sword and Shield, and Chingling is the lightest baby Pokemon. With its base stat total of 285, Chingling is actually only the 120th weakest Pokemon, including regionals, meaning it's actually not even in the bottom 10% of weakest Pokemon, despite being a baby. Stunky can be seen as a parallel to Glameow. Stunky is exclusive to Pokemon Diamond and Black 2, while Glameow is exclusive to Pokemon Pearl and White 2, and their evolved forms are used by Team Galactic Commanders Jupiter and Mars respectively. Also, they both belong to the Field Egg group and a 2-stage evolutionary line, and they both cannot be found in Pokemon Platinum. Due to the censor that prevents Pokemon with offensive nicknames from being traded on the GTS, an English language Skuntank cannot be traded on the GTS without a nickname in Pokemon Black and White, cause, you know. As both of this Pokemon's abilities are used at the same time in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time and Explorers of Darkness, and it wasn't weak to Ghost and Dark type moves at the time, Bronzor doesn't have any weaknesses in those games. And there's an unused sprite within Pokemon Diamond and Pearl for Bronzor's back sprite, which is just a duplicate of its front sprite. Prior to Generation 8, Bronzong was the only Pokemon able to learn Rain Dance by leveling up that could not learn any moves nor have any abilities that benefit from rain. This may be related to its Pokedex entries, several of which mention Bronzong's natural power to summon rain clouds. Bonsly is the only Pokemon that's usable in-game by a player during the generation before its release, as it was on the Battle Bingo Bonsly card in Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. Bonsly has the lowest base special attack stat of any Pokemon, tied with Shuckle, Feebas, and Alolan Sandshrew, and Bonsly's English name was revealed on June 16, 2005, which was still before Pokemon Diamond and Pearl were released in Japan. Mime Jr. is the only Pokemon with two types whose primary type becomes its evolution's secondary type. This is only the case if it evolves into Galarian Mr. Mime, as regular Mr. Mime share their exact typing with Mime Jr. Mime Jr. is the only Pokemon with a catch rate of 145, and Mime Jr. has the lowest base HP stat of all Psychic type and Fairy type Pokemon. All moves Happiny can learn by leveling up in Pokemon Legends Arceus are moves it could not legally learn before by any means. The only other Pokemon with this distinction is Burmy, which only learns Struggle Bug by level up in Legends Arceus. Happiny is the only Pokemon that evolves twice by leveling up under certain conditions, once by holding an item, and again with high friendship. Chatot is the only Pokemon that is not legendary or mythical to be banned from Generation 5's Global Battle Union. This is likely due to Chatot's signature move Chatter and its ability to play pre-recorded audio, which can be abused to play vulgar words and phrases. This vulnerability is also presumably the reason for the move's ability to play pre-recorded audio being removed starting with Generation 6, and in Generation 4, a person in Eterna City will trade a Chatot in return for a Buizel, and the Chatot's nickname is Charup, a mixture of its English and Japanese names. If this Pokemon was obtained in an English language version of Diamond or Pearl and is transferred to X or Y, the game will recognize the Chatot to be Japanese. Spiritomb is heavily associated with the number 108, a number considered sacred in Indian religions. Several of its Pokedex entries state that it was formed from 108 spirits. Its number in the Sinnoh Pokedex is 108, its defense and special defense base stats are both 108, it weighs exactly 108 kg. In Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, it can be found at Sea Morville, which lies on Route 108. In Pokemon Go, it is encountered at the end of a special research quest involving feeding 108 berries to Pokemon and catching 108 Pokemon. In Pokemon Legends Arceus, it is encountered at the end of a quest in which the player must gather 108 wisps scattered throughout Hisui, and when Spiritomb appears as an alpha Pokemon in Pokemon Legends Arceus, the markings of the odd keystone will glow a deep red. The Gible evolutionary line made its anime debuts in reverse order of evolution. Garchomp appeared first in top-down training, Gabite appeared second in another one Gabites the Dust, and Gible appeared last in a rivalry to Gibbelon. Due to the censor that prevents Pokemon with offensive nicknames being traded on the GTS, an English language Gabite cannot be traded on the GTS without a nickname in Pokemon Black and White. This is because bite in French actually means dick. Garchomp is the only pseudo-legendary Pokemon to have gender differences, and although the Garchomp in Pokepark Wii Pikachu's Adventure and its sequel has no notch on its fin, he is referred to as male. Munchlax appeared in 4 games before its generation. Ordered by release date, they are Pokemon Dash, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, Pokemon Team Turbo, and Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team. Although obtainable through hacking in Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness as it has an index number, unlike Bonsly, it is unusable as it was not programmed to be used in battle, and Munchlax has the highest base stat total of any baby Pokemon. Due to Riolu's combination of abilities, Steadfast can only activate in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time and Explorers of Darkness, and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky if Riolu becomes cross-eyed or is made to cringe by a foe that has Mold Breaker. And Riolu is the only baby Pokemon that evolves into a Pokemon capable of Mega Evolution. Lucario is the only Generation 4 Pokemon to be playable in the Super Smash Bros. Series, though many others appear from Pokeballs, and in the Pokemon of the Year poll held by the Pokemon Company in 2020, Lucario was voted the most popular Generation 4 Pokemon, receiving 102,259 votes. It was also the second most popular Pokemon overall. Despite having notable gender differences, both Hippopotas and Hippowdon each have only one official Ken Sugimori artwork, Pokemon Global Link artwork, and menu icons, except for those of Pokemon Legends Arceus, all of which depict the male variations. In Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time and Explorers of Darkness, both Hippowdon and Hippopotas have the same recruit rate, something rarely found with Pokemon of the same evolutionary line. Skorupi is the only dual-type bug/poison-type Pokemon to have poison as its primary type instead of its secondary type, and Skorupi is the only Pokemon to have the bug type changed upon evolution. Drapion and Skorupi are the only Generation 4 Pokemon with an insectoid body. Drapion and Skorupi are also the only Generation 4 Pokemon in the Water 3 egg group. Croagunk is one of few Pokemon to have its handheld game sprite differ from its 3D image. While in Pokemon Diamond, Pearl and Platinum it is shown to have pink cheeks, its 3D models, official artwork and anime appearance show it with yellow-orange cheeks. In the anime, its Pokemon Dream World artwork, Pokemon Home and Pokemon Legends Arceus, Toxicroak is depicted with a light turquoise skin similar to its shiny coloration. This appears to be its ordinary coloration in the anime. In Pokemon Battle Revolution, Toxic is depicted as two purple orbs spinning around each other towards the target. However, when Carnivine uses Toxic, the orbs travel erratically. The same animation is used for Spinder, and Carnivine shares its name, possibly by coincidence, with a monster from the Dragon Quest series. Finneon can learn Nature Power via TM, even though its evolved form cannot. And Finneon and Lumineon are the only Generation 4 Pokemon to have a Piscine body. And Lumineon's facts are both the same, so I think I'll just include something else. Lumineon's HP, attack and special attack are all 69, baby, let's go! Mantike is the only Pokemon that requires a specific Pokemon, Remoraid, to be in the party in order to evolve it. This is based on the aspect of mutualism, a form of symbiosis in which two organisms depend on each other for survival. And despite the Pokédex entries in Pokemon Pearl, Black 2, White 2, X, Omega Ruby, Ultra Moon and Shining Pearl stating that Mantike has patterns that vary by region, it has the same pattern in every game it has been in. No other Pokemon has the same type combination as Snover in its evolution. Snover and Abomasnow are also the only Ice-type Pokemon in the Grass Egg group. Mega Abomasnow is the only Pokemon with a base stat total of 594. Abomasnow is the only Grass-type Pokemon that can Mega Evolve that is not a starter Pokemon, and Abomasnow is the first Pokemon by alphabetical order. Weavile can be seen as a parallel to Gliscor. Both were introduced in Generation 4, both of them are dual types, have the same base stat total, have special attack as their lowest stat, have double weaknesses, Gliscor to Ice, Weavile to Fighting, evolve from Pokemon that were introduced in Generation 2, and do so by leveling up at night while holding items that contain the word Razor. Sneasel evolves with the Razor Claw, whereas Gligar evolves with the Razor Fang. And Weavile is the only Pokemon within its family that does not possess 3 abilities. Despite having a clearly visible tail, Licky belongs to a group of Pokemon which lack tails. This is not the case for its pre-evolution Lickitung. And Licky would have been obtainable in both Generation 2 and Generation 3 if it had existed, as in both there was a possible way to get a Lickitung that had rollout. It shares this trait with Mamoswine. As there is no special magnetic field in Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it is impossible to evolve Magneton into a Magnezone in these games. The same applies for Probopass, Leafeon and Glaceon. All have to be traded from Pokemon Diamond, Pearl and Platinum to be obtained, and in the September 2013 Pokemon Direct, Magnezone was mistakenly labelled as a female Pokemon when it should be gender unknown. It was later corrected on the official website. Rhyperior and its pre-evolved form share their category with Nidoking and Nidoqueen. They are all known as the Drill Pokemon. Additionally, all 4 Pokemon are partly ground types. And since there are no more facts, here's a funny Rhyperior card. Until the release of Pokemon Platinum, the only way to obtain Tangrowth was to transfer a Tangela via Palpark and evolve it. This was the only case in which a Generation 4 Pokemon was only obtainable through Palpark. And same with Rhyperior, here's a funny card. Electivire's evolutionary line may be considered a counterpart of Magmortar's. Both evolve starting at level 30 and whose evolved forms evolve via trading with an item containing the suffix Iser. Both have the same gender ratio, 75% male, 25% female, and both are typically exclusive to one version of a pair of games. They both have similar status-inducing abilities in Flame Body and Static, as well as the same hidden ability, Vital Spirit. Their evolutionary relatives were also released in the same generations, Generation 1 and Generation 2. Magmortar, along with Electivire, Gliscor and Tangrowth, were the only Generation 4 Pokemon that explicitly required the use of a Generation 3 game in order to be available until the release of Pokemon Platinum. In this case, both the Magmarizer and Magby were only available through dual slot mode with Pokemon Leaf Green. Togekiss is the only Pokemon that has a gender ratio of 7:1, that have had a female shown in the anime but not a male. In Pokken Tournament, Togekiss is the only support Pokemon with a charge time of normal, and Togekiss in its pre-evolved form are the only Pokemon that are in the Flying and Fairy Egg groups. They're also the only Fairy-type Pokemon in the Flying Egg group. Despite having significantly higher special attack than attack, Yanmega gives out 2 attack EVs when defeated. And since there were so little facts, here's 2 funny Yanmega cards. Here's the first one, and here's the second one. That's pretty cool. According to the Diamond and Pearl Pokédex, Leafeon, Glaceon and Umbreon have identical footprints. Leafeon, along with Glaceon, is the only evolution to not be seen evolving from Eevee on screen in the anime. Despite Eevee being obtainable before the Pokemon League and Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, it cannot evolve into Glaceon or Leafeon until after the Elite Four is defeated. This is because Twist Mountain, where the Ice Rock is located, cannot be reached until that point in the game, as the entrances to it and the Two-Blind Bridge are blocked. And according to the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl Beta and the data files of Pokemon Battle Revolution, Glaceon's developmental name was Aisha. This name may be derived from ice. Gliscor can be seen as a parallel to Weavile. Both were introduced in Generations 4, both of them are dual types, have the same base stat total, have special attack as their lowest stat, have double weaknesses, Gliscor to ice, Weavile to fighting, evolve from Pokemon that were introduced in Generation 2, and do so by leveling up at night while holding items that contain the word Razor. Gligar evolves with the Razor Fang, whereas Sneasel evolves with the Razor Claw. No other Pokemon has the same type combination as Mamoswine and its pre-evolutions. Mamoswine's type combination is also the only combination weak to all 3 starter Pokemon types, Grass, Water and Fire. And Mamoswine's Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, Soul Silver, Black 2, White 2 and Y Pokedex entries are a reference to how woolly mammoths became extinct. Porygon Z is the only Generation 4 Pokemon that has not appeared in the main series anime. The dubious disc's name implies that Porygon Z, unlike its pre-evolution, was not authorized by Silphco. Porygon Z is the only Pokemon whose Japanese name is spelled with a character from a foreign alphabet. Porygon Z is the only Pokemon that evolves from a Pokemon that evolves via trading, and Porygon Z is tied with Drampa, Mega Pidgeot, and Blood Moon Ursaluna for the highest base special attack stat of all normal type Pokemon. Gallade is the only Generation 4 Pokemon with a Paradox Pokemon counterpart. Gallade is also the only Pokemon introduced prior to Generation 8 to have Sharpness as an ability, and the only Pokemon to have Sharpness as a non-hidden ability. Gallade's attack and special attack stats are the reverse of Gardevoir's, while their other stats are identical. And Gallade and Gardevoir are the only Pokemon capable of Mega Evolution that are in the same evolutionary line. Due to the censor that prevents Pokemon with offensive nicknames being traded on the GTS, an English language Probopass could not be traded on the GTS without a nickname in Pokemon Black and White, because, you know, he's got that Probo ass. Probopass is the only non-electric type Pokemon that can be obtained via the use of a Thunderstone, and Probopass is tied with Registeel and Hisuian Goodra for the highest base special defense stat of all Steel type Pokemon. In the novelization of the Ghoul Days episode included in the Pokemon Annual 2010, Dusknoir is described on multiple occasions as being metallic. And since that's the only fact I've got, here is Trevenant and Dusknoir looking like the coolest Cyclops ghost ever, and here is Dusknoir outside your house. For real. Don't open your window. No other Pokemon has the same type combination as Frostlass. Due to the censor that prevents Pokemon with offensive nicknames being traded on the GTS, an English language Frostlass could not be traded on the GTS without a nickname in Pokemon Black and White. Frostlass and its evolutionary relatives are the only Ice-type Pokemon in the Fairy Egg group, and Frostlass is also the only Ghost-type Pokemon in the Fairy Egg group. When Rotom is encountered in the Old Chateau in Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, the music is Battle Legendary Pokemon, even though Rotom is not classified as a legendary. To date, Rotom is the only Pokemon with this trait. And despite becoming part Flying type, Fan Rotom retains the ability Levitate, being the only Flying type Pokemon with this ability. As its Flying type already makes it immune to Ground type moves, its ability is effectively useless under normal conditions. In Generation 9, prior to the version 2.0.1 update of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Uxie was unable to learn moves via Move Reminder. Uxie is tied with Mesprit and Azelf for the highest base friendship of all legendary Pokemon, and here's a very cool Uxie card, and a card of Uxie looking a bit rounder than normal. Mesprit is somewhat unique among the members of its trio, as it leaves Lake Verity and begins roaming Sinnoh after being encountered by the player in Lake Verity's cavern. And in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time, Darkness and Sky, Mesprit is the only one of the Lake Guardians to fight the main character in battle during the main story, despite being depicted as a calm and peaceful Pokemon. It was enraged by a previous attack on its counterpart Uxie, and quite fiercely attacked the hero and their partner. Azelf's facts are all literally just the same as Yuxi's, so let's review some cool card art and maybe some funny moves. This Mysterious Treasures Hollow Rare Azelf is pretty cool, but I'm more focused on the downer material. Forbidden Light Uncommon Azelf has Psychic Abduction. Plasma Blast Rare Azelf is Side Jamming. To what beat? I don't know. According to Junichi Masuda's blog, the Spanish translation team for Pokemon suggested changing the name Dialga because of its similarity to the Spanish word alga, algae/seaweed. Dialga is the only legendary Pokemon to have a role in 4 different movies, and although Dialga is gender unknown in the core series games, it's referred to as male in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time, and Explorers of Darkness' story. It's still gender unknown for purposes of gameplay. Palkia's gender differs between various Pokemon media. It is gender unknown in the core series games, male in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time and Explorers of Darkness' story, although it's still gender unknown for purposes of gameplay, and female in the Russian dub of the anime. Palkia is in the highest IQ group. It takes its position in IQ Group J and is the only Pokemon in IQ Group J. And in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time and Darkness, Palkia, along with Primal Dialga, the legendary Giants, the Magnemite family, and Regigigas all speak in capital letters, unlike the other Pokemon in the game. No other Pokemon has the same type combination as Heatran. Heatran has the most double resistances of all Pokemon with 5, Steel, Bug, Grass, Ice, and Fairy. In the Japanese version of Pokemon X and Y, 2 women in Jean Plaza mimic the sounds of Pokemon. One mimics the sound of a Heatran, while the other complements her. However, this is mistranslated in the English version to say that there is a Lava Dome Pokemon in Jean Plaza. Regigigas is the only Generation 4 legendary Pokemon whose attack stat is higher than its special attack stat. In Platinum, by hacking to obtain Cherish Balls, it is possible to trick the game into opening Rock Peak, Iceberg, and Iron Ruins by catching the in-game Regigigas in a Cherish Ball. The game thinks the Regigigas was obtained in an event. Regigigas is the only one of the legendary giants to not have its type reference in its name, and in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Regigigas has the widest overworld sprite of all Pokemon. In Pokemon Legends Arceus, Shiny Giratina in its origin form causes a game crash when using Shadow Force. This bug has yet to be fixed. Giratina's encounter in the Distortion world in Pokemon Platinum has several distinctions from other battles. At the start of the battle, it uniquely descends from the top of the screen and is accompanied by the unique message, "The Distortion World's Giratina appeared." It is still a wild Pokemon despite the unique message. No platform is displayed beneath Giratina, and it does not have a shadow until it uses Shadow Force or breaks out of a Pokeball. And Giratina is the only legendary Pokemon that can be obtained in all 5 of the Generation 4 core series handheld games. In Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Brilliant Diamond, and Shining Pearl, despite being a legendary Pokemon, battling the wild Cresselia plays Battle Wild Pokemon. In Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, Battle Strong Wild Pokemon plays instead. Cresselia is incorrectly stated to be an Ice type in Pokemon 4 Coma, and Cresselia is the only legendary Pokemon in the Coronet Highlands sublisting of the Hisui Pokedex. Phione is the only Pokemon obtainable by breeding a mythical Pokemon. Breeding either Manaphy or Phione can produce a Phione egg, but Phione can neither evolve into Manaphy nor produce eggs that can hatch into Manaphy. Phione has exactly the same base stats as Glalie. Manaphy and Ditto are the only Pokemon that are able to breed and yet are unobtainable through breeding. In Pokemon Platinum, the player can register Manaphy as seen in the Pokedex by inspecting a book in Mr. Backlot's room at the Pokemon Mansion. Because breeding Manaphy with Ditto produces only Phione eggs, there is yet to be an explanation on how Manaphy eggs are produced. Despite being a gender unknown Pokemon, the Darkrai in Pokemon Mystery Dungeons, Explorers of Time, Explorers of Darkness, and Explorers of Sky is referred to as a male. In the early Japanese versions of Diamond and Pearl, Darkrai can be caught with the Surf glitch. However, this glitch was fixed in other language versions. Another glitch has been discovered that allows players of other language releases to reach Darkrai without the member card, and Darkrai's effort value yield of 2 special attack and 1 speed is unique. Shaymin's Sky form is the only flying-type mythical Pokemon, excluding Arceus while holding a Sky Plate. Shaymin requires Pokemon Sword or Shield save data to be caught in Pokemon Legends Arceus, despite not being available in either of the former. Despite being a mythical Pokemon, Battle Wild Pokemon plays while battling it in Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Brilliant Diamond, and Shining Pearl. In Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, Arceus can be encountered without the use of the Azure Flute by a combination of tweaking and the Palpark Retire glitch. In addition, Arceus can be encountered an unlimited amount of times with this method, unlike Darkrai and Shaymin. Arceus is the only Pokemon to make the introduction for a core series game. In Pokemon Legends Arceus, Arceus' summary will say it was met at the Temple of Sinnoh despite being fought and obtained in the Hall of Origin, and prior to Generation 7, Arceus was classified by Pokedex color sorting as grey.